Right, Robbo, $1 million question, I suppose. Could this have happened if Kylian Mbappe was still in the team?
Ooh.
Well, the work rate wouldn't have been the same, would it? In down one side of the field, and maybe he'd have influenced others not to work quite so hard. But this is a team performance. I don't think they would have been as good with Mbappe in the side. I know he's an outstanding player and he's done well at scoring goals this season for Real Madrid, but you see their work rate hasn't been good enough. And if one player doesn't work hard and doesn't close things down, then other players can't get as tight. They can't back up that player because, you know, he's not going to work hard enough. And all around the pitch, the work rate, the energy, the athleticism of the PSG players was magnificent. And they made good decisions, whether a young team, an experienced team. They made the right decisions when to go and close down, when to drop off, when to keep the ball, when to play one touch, when to go back to their centre halves and start again. It was the all-round performance. But one thing I would say about Inter, when I looked at them coming onto the field after, and Ali's just mentioned, in the first 5 or 10 minutes, I think there was a lot of players out there that weren't fully fit. Pavard shouldn't have been on the field. Lautaro Martinez hasn't played for a little while, hasn't been at his best. He didn't look fully fit. Thuram didn't look fully fit. There was a lot of players that couldn't cope with the athleticism of PSG.
I want to talk about Inter and their frailties and where it went wrong for them in a moment, but just going back to the Kylian Mbappe question.
That's tricky because, of course, everybody can recognize the talent that he has. But I always say, it's more difficult for a coach to build a team when you have a superstar.
Right.
And always been.
So it's interesting. Like, you look at this team, and Dembele obviously has done really well, but he didn't have the greatest of games, and it didn't really matter today, did it?
No, because the commitment of Dembele has been spot on. And that's what we've been criticizing Mbappe, because when you lose the ball, you don't do the job. And it was the same for others. And when they were the three of them with Messi, we all know that he never did that, but he had the players around him to be acceptable. But for Paris Saint-Germain, when they were the three, Neymar, Mbappe, and Messi, that was too much. The team was cut in half almost, and it was always the same. Yeah, okay, you get the ball back and you give us the ball, and we try to make the difference. It doesn't work like that, especially nowadays. But it's always been like that.
What do you mean, especially nowadays? Are we seeing the era of a superstar maybe being diluted now more?
I mean, we put players in another pedestal at some point, like we go to statistics, and as soon as a player scores a goal, if he's a forward player, he had a good game. It's not enough for me. I mean, maybe it works that way. I don't know. But you can talk about it because you were a striker.
But like Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, the standout solo talents that we've seen over the last 30 years.
They had the players to compensate their non-involvement in when they didn't have the ball, and they knew it. But put Ronaldo in the Paris Saint-Germain squads 2 years ago, that would have been the same problem.
With Messi, Neymar.
Yeah, that would have been the same problem. And it's a lesson for football.
Right.
That it's today Paris Saint-Germain. We say Craig was naming them the circus. But for the first time, they don't have superstars, and they win the Champions League.
Right.
And they have a team, and they play well, and they can compete against City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Aston Villa, and Inter Milan.
Yeah.
And they are the best team in the world because they don't have a superstar. So we have to stop building superstars, because superstars, they have to stop thinking they are superstars, because they have to do the bad work, the dirty work, which means defending, helping the others.
Mbappe in that starting 11 today, are we having a different conversation?
Well, they may have won the game, but not in the manner in which they did. And I know we're going to talk about Inter later, but it's also a very poor reflection on Inter's performance. PSG were outstanding, Inter not so much. And going back to PSG and the conversation of Kylian Mbappe, you keep mentioning the word superstar. I think what has happened is because we've been treated to Ronaldo and Messi, they leave the main stage. And so we have this desperation to put somebody else on that stage. Here's the problem. They have their own stage. They have their own level. And so teams will accommodate their performances according to Lionel Messi because of what he was at his very best. And so that's why when he plays with Argentina, everybody sacrifices because they say, this guy is worth that sacrifice. What I would suggest is Kylian Mbappe, as good as he may be, he is not worth that sacrifice because he is not at the level of Lionel Messi. But we have this desperation of, well, these guys have cleared the stage, so it must be Mbappe, the one that is going to take it on. It must be Neymar that is going to take it on. It's going to be this guy or the other that is going to take it on. Good luck with that, because that standard is completely separate and completely unrealistic. As it pertains to PSG today, specific examples as to what would not have happened if Kylian Mbappe had been on the field. It was 3-0. They were up already 3-0. Kvaratskhelia sprinting 60 yards to get ahead of the attacking player, I think it was Dumfries, who was trying to get in behind. The game was already 3-0. You could be thinking about celebrating. You can be thinking about winning. But it's the mentality of PSG and players like Kvaratskhelia that will run and chase 60 yards so that they can win a ball that essentially would have been meaningless. But yet there is something to be said about the sacrifice that these players are willing to make. Doué was doing the same thing down the right-hand side. Dembele tracking players. There's something to be said about the mentality of a group in which you have players that traditionally haven't been the hardest working players in defensive position, tracking back and making the defensive plays that are needed. That is credit to the individual player, but it's also credit to the mentality that and the example that is being set forth and demanded by the manager, Luis Enrique.
To Robbo's point, when you have someone like Mbappe, who isn't tracking back, who isn't putting the work rate in, does it filter through to other players?
Of course. And we are targeting Mbappe, but I'm sorry, this season we can target also Vinicius Junior.
Sure.
Of course, because we saw what happened to Real Madrid, and that was the perfect example to what we used to see with Paris Saint-Germain, what we saw in Real Madrid, because you don't have some players compensating the fact that those two players weren't defending. But of course, you create something. A scar, kind of a scar inside the dressing room, where the players, they say, well, I'm fed up running for that guy. Yeah, he's a star. Yeah, he does the job, but at some point, he doesn't help us out. And it would have been, and I say that with Marquinhos, Thiago Silva, when Mbappe was in Paris Saint-Germain, they should have said something in the dressing room and sort out the problem. It would have happened the same that way if I would have been playing for Paris Saint-Germain in the 90s. And I tell you, Didier Deschamps, Marcel Desailly, they would have never accepted somebody not doing the job.
It's interesting, we look at that graphic that was just up, and this isn't a fairy tale of lots of youngsters coming through the youth system. They have picked exactly the right players, despite the fact that, they've spent a lot of money on young players, as someone like Chelsea have done as well.
Yeah.
But what they've done, they seem to have got it right. Much more than they've got it wrong.
And credit to Luis Enrique. I mean, the guy, we remember the Paris Saint-Germain that we saw at the beginning of the season, that wasn't the same. And suddenly something clicked, and they absolutely, since then, been perfect. But in contrary with Chelsea, you still have Marquinhos. Right. You still have Fabian Ruiz. I mean, with the experience that he has. Some players, Ousmane Dembele is not a young player for me. He's a player with experience. And that mix of players committing together creates the difference.